very heartwarming that you are holding a Salam alaikum. It is very heartwarming that you are holding a solidarity event to recognize and celebrate the importance of the international community of students, faculty, and scholars there in Buffalo. All 18 of my students are disappointed and saddened to not be able to travel to Buffalo at this time and to have lost the opportunity to engage in dialogue with our sisters and brothers in the United States. I had originally hoped to have messages and introductions from my students so you would know each of them a little bit better. However, in part because of cultural views about photographing and videoing women here, and perhaps more primary concerns that we be cautious in this sensitive situation, I am unable to share their voices or images with you. So I'm sorry I'm not able to let them share their own greetings and stories, but I do want to tell you a little bit more about them as a group. The students who were coming with me to the University at Buffalo are all female Muslim undergraduate students here in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. All public schools here are segregated by gender up through the bachelor's level, so only women are enrolled in our school social work and our psychology and human services programs. 15 of the women who have traveled have Emirati passports. One holds a Lebanese passport and 2 hold passports from Yemen. All were born and raised here in the UAE. The 2 students who hold Yemen passports have Emirati mothers, but yet fathers from Yemen. And so, although this is changing because the UAE is a signatory to the Convention on All Forms of Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, currently only fathers can pass Emirati citizenship to their children at birth. One of the students who holds a Yemeni passport was constantly in my mind as I was organizing this trip because she has a degenerative vision disability, and I wanted her to see snow before she loses her vision completely. I knew we could find snow in Buffalo. She has done much to encourage the development of services to students with disabilities here on our campus, and now she has moved on to her internship where she continues her advocacy in the community. One other student who would have traveled with us also has a disability. All of our students have a thirst for knowledge and are committed to giving back to the UAE, a country that has given them so much. The UAE has national health care, free education through college, generous scholarships for graduate study abroad as well as here in the UAE, free land and interest-free loans for newlyweds to build homes, and in fact, even money to help pay for their sometimes quite extravagant weddings. The country also provides a monthly financial stipend to support each child in the family. In the same way that we currently have the tallest building, the biggest mall, and the fastest roller coaster, we also want to have the best social services in the world. So the women coming to New York with me wanted to learn more about social work and social services there in the USA so they could identify and adapt models to make them culturally appropriate for implementation here in the UAE. Despite common misinformation about women in the Islamic world, it is the right of women in the UAE to go to school. In fact, women make up 77% of our students in higher education, which is the highest percentage in the world. Since in Islam, men are responsible for the financial support of the family, women have the luxury of working outside of the home or not, and any money she earns is hers to keep and does not have to be used for support of the household unless she so chooses. Although most of my students will marry, if they aren't already, most of them will marry through an arranged marriage, to which they do have the right to say no to a prospective suitor. Most of my students will also likely work outside of the home. Almost all can be guaranteed to move into management roles in the government ministries, where they will have significant impact on policy and services here in the UAE. 8 of the women who would have visited the UAE will graduate at the end of this semester. The name of these graduating seniors are Aliyah, Sheikha, Nusayba, Lulua, Asma, Moza, Fatima, and Sarah. 4 other women will graduate in December, and their names are Iman, Nuf, Sarah, and Reem. The next will graduate next year, and their names are Moza, Kaula, Miriam, Sarah, Marwa, and Rima. One of our students would also have been traveling with her 2-month-old infant, and her husband was going to come along to help with childcare as needed. We also had two other Masters of Social Work students coming with us as guests from another federal institution. These two students, Leila and Salim, are responsible for organizing the first professional social work organization here in the UAE. I can tell you that every one of them, and the faculty and the chaperones who would have traveled, are saddened and disappointed to not be traveling to Buffalo. These are bright, enthusiastic, committed, peace-loving, and knowledge-seeking women. Please understand that we felt we had to cancel this trip in part because of safety reasons, also not wanting them to be caught in the middle of changing policy decisions, or possibly even harmed by the Islamophobia that seems to continue to grow. The UAE is committed to tolerance. We even have a new Ministry of Tolerance, along with a Ministry of Happiness, and are committed to global engagement. My university is committed to ensuring that students embrace diverse cultures and have the knowledge they need to work and live in a global world. My hope is that one day we will be able to bring a similar group of students to Buffalo to engage in scholarly and cultural dialogue and exchange. Thank you all for this opportunity, and please know that every one of my students sends their greetings and hopes for the future. Masalama.
So that was just a message from the group that was supposed to come. Hopefully they'll come in the future, but for now, I'll hand it over to Samiha. Do you need me to switch slides or anything? No. I think I'm going to wait a little bit on that. It was like should I use the mic or this? If you want, just so that people online can record it. Okay. Sure. But basically just keep it on.
Hello? Okay, cool.
Much better.
Much better?
Much better.
Much better, okay. So I'll keep this on. Stay on. Did I handheld mic or anything? No? It's okay. Is this okay? Okay, cool. Alright, so I'd like to thank initially the Office of Social Work for the honor of being able to be allowed to come in and speak today. Just briefly, although I did get a really good introduction, my name is Samiha Islam. I'm a junior, and I'm currently serving as the Muslim Student Association president. Now, I didn't want to start this with all of the cliches of what my major was or what I'm doing, but I did want to give you a little bit of information about myself, because I think it explains why I'm here. So, I am an immigrant. I'm a child of two worlds, born in Bangladesh, traveled here at the age of 3 in the heart of good old Illinois. There are things that when I grew up I didn't know, but I heard of later. I heard of a mother who held the doors of the balcony every afternoon and cried for a home and family she left behind. I heard of a father who took out college loans to pay for a daughter to learn perfect English so that she wouldn't struggle in the future. I experienced a childhood where I was raised amongst cornfields and white people, no offense, to the point where I felt ashamed to eat rice for lunch and look brown. And then, when I was a teenager, I discovered that I am a Muslim. It came in a point in my life when I was trying to straddle two boats, swiftly moving apart, one wanting so desperately to fit in, and the other one held by cultural expectations and dictates. 13 years old, standing in the middle of a parking lot, being told by someone I had never seen before, never met and never spoken to, "You don't have to wear that, you know." Confused, I looked down. Jeans, a t-shirt, a small black scarf, nothing crazy. And yet she continued to scream to the silent audience, on and on, "My fathers died for your freedom," as if I had somehow destroyed it just by being me. And so I ran away in a fit of tears, and all around there was silence from the watching eyes. And I came to realize She's absolutely wrong, yet so very right. I didn't have to wear that, and I don't have to wear this. I chose to because I am free. And I've heard a lot more since then, but surprisingly something has never changed, ever. And that is the silence. And so I dream of a world where there is no silence, where you don't fear to ask me who I am or why, where taboos are disregarded for knowledge, where people learn and seek and see diversity as a unique blessing that it is, and a land where immigrants are celebrated, not estranged. Which is why I became a teacher, and which is why I'm here. And I think a lot of you have those similar thoughts and values, which is why you're in the Office of Social Work. And so I tell and remind all of us that we are right now a nation in need. The university at Buffalo is in need. We talk on these campuses a lot about diversity, inclusion. We dedicate departments and classes, and yet as students, when we see that our president is advocating for a ban to disclude people simply on the basis of their religious affiliation, it shows us that as a nation, we still have a long way to go. And Muslims, we come to this crossroad of choice. Do we accept what's being said about us? Do we internalize it? Do we victimize ourselves to it? Or do we take a stand? Do we reach out to talk and to educate through the mediums possible to us to pave a path of discourse, of discussion, of understanding, so that we don't feel, or the child, our next generations don't feel automatically incapable or inadequate of being, of belonging simply because of their religion. And this didn't stop. Sometimes people isolate this idea that this was just Donald Trump. It was just his administration. But there was a lot of rhetoric going around during the campaign season that a Muslim child could never be president because their values were not American enough. That a Muslim would never be able to align themselves into the American society. And what does that tell a child growing up in this world? What does that tell children who are wanting to be a part and yet seeing that they're being told, no, not until you give up who you are? And I've been faced with this as well while I was at UB. I've had people, professors, adults walk down hallways who can't make eye contact with me. I have had a man ask in the hallway, a grown man, well into his 30s and 40s, when's Halloween? I've had an elderly woman ask me, how can a man love you if he can't see your face? I've been told in the middle of a supermarket in Buffalo, right here, get that shit off your face and become a real woman and go back to where you came from. I've met with people in classes where you're told, oh, talk to the person next to you in case you need notes. And I look right and suddenly they're busy. I look left and suddenly they're busy too. And that shows us that Islamophobia isn't always in what is said, but is sometimes spoken in silence. We wonder at surprise why a campaign on these policies was accepted, why it still has support, why it still exists. And the answer is ignorance. And I believe we have a collective duty to combat it. And so I'm here to talk a little bit about Islam, talk a little bit about Muslims and about this ban. And however, I do have to preface this by saying that my opinions are my own and not necessarily my club. As you know, Muslims are one of the most diverse religions in the world. We are not a monolith. So the things that I express may not be the things my friends express. So a lot of what I will say is basic, so it doesn't really face controversy. But if in times of questions, what I will say is from what I am knowledgeable about or what I am aware, but be aware there may be differences in opinion within Islamic thought, as is in any field. So, having said that, who are Muslims? And I know this is more political, but I felt like we needed to go back just a little bit. Who are Muslims? Because these terms are used often interchangeably in media and reports and things like this. Islam, Muslim, Islamic, I've heard Muslimic, I've heard so many different variations. So, first of all, being Muslim and American are not two mutually exclusive things. Islam has been in America since before America even existed as a nation. Some of the slaves that fought in the early wars, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, were Muslim. And these are things that are important to mention because in popular discourse, Islam is seen as foreign, something that's been, since 9/11 or like since recent times. It's not true. Islam has existed in America since the very conception of America itself. Today, Islam, and some statistics say Islam is the largest religion in the world. Some still say it is second. But in the United States, it's one of the 3 largest non-Christian religions. And approximately 3 million Muslims live in this nation. It's the most ethnically diverse group. You will virtually find Muslims in every nation. A lot of religious backgrounds, for example, are very ethnically centered in certain areas, and so you're able to identify those. In Islam, the highest Muslim population is in the country Indonesia, which isn't even mentioned in the media half the time. We have Muslims in every province in China, which you don't expect quite often. It's the most ethnically diverse religion because it is a way of life which is then interpreted in different ways by different cultures and countries. So for example, what the professor spoke about, some of the traditions in Dubai or the UAE are very specified to their cultural traditions with the overarching understanding of Islam. So there are very, very different things. Often when people point, Islam is the problem, and then they start talking about a country, I'm like, hold on a second. Islam is that way of life. The country's interpretations are their own. So there are very, very different social structures that are separate from the religious structure itself. So, to break it down. So Islam, it comes from the root istislam in the Arabic language, and it means to submit. To submit yourself to a higher deity, to submit yourself to the best way of life. And it comes from the root salam, which is often quoted, which means peace. So basically, it's a path of submitting yourself throughout life to achieve peace. That's literally what that terminology means. Then Muslim, this beginning part, only means the one who follows Islam. So you can't say, are you Islam? That doesn't make sense. Islam is the way one lives one's life. And a Muslim, just this one letter, mim, at the beginning of salam here, Muslim, it makes it so it means that it is one who follows this way of life. That's the only differentiation. Islamic, here's when things get funky. Islamic is not an Arabic term. Islam is an Arabic term. Muslim is an Arabic term. And we've just used them in English. And then Islamic comes in, and that is literally not an Arabic term. It's Islam added by the suffix IC for adjectives in the English language. So Islamic is just an English adaptation of an Arabic word, and it pertains to anything that relates to Islam and is not very specific. So you couldn't say, are you Islamic? That makes no sense. I'm not pertaining or relating to Islam. It's just these terminologies, these basic things that often when you're interacting with Muslims, it's like, okay, that's one of the first key things which I feel like when you're talking to a people or trying to understand a people, you've got to know their terms. And this is just some of the basics. There's hundreds and hundreds of more. But that is where the confusion often lies, is when you're going from Arabic and then taking an Arabic word and making it English and then just using it wherever you wish. It creates that confusion. So Islam is a way of life. It's based on collectivism. It's a duty to yourself, to your family, to your community. Some of what the professor mentioned, how there are certain expectations of males, of females, of different parts of a community. In America, it's very individualistic, where it really focuses on the self. But a lot of Islamic culture is a collective duty. Like, it's your collective duty to take care of your parents once they age. It's actually written in the tenets of Islam, you must take care of your parents when they age. It's not an ideal, it's a requirement. And so there are various things that espouse collective ideals. And yes, we tend to have certain dress codes of modesty, which is actually for both men and women. The women tend to be more predominant because of the headscarf, and which is called the hijab, or the abaya, which is often referred to as a dress. But, like I said, because it's so ethnically diverse, I call this an abaya, a different country calls it a different thing. A different country calls it a different thing. I call this a hijab. In Bangladesh, we just call it a urna, like a scarf. This is the niqab, or just the face veil, which I refer to. In different countries, they refer to it as different things. And so it all kind of differs. Never consider Islam to be a monolith when it comes to even terminologies like this, because it's so culturally diverse. So when addressing or working with Muslims, it's often important to keep that in mind, that you might be embarrassed to ask, but it's okay. People are really interested in sharing and explaining what those cultures are like. We pray 5 times a day. So if you have Muslim students or friends or acquaintances and they're like, I have to get a 5-minute break, it tends to usually be for prayers. We fast for a whole month from dawn to dusk, the month of Ramadan, which I think is getting a little bit more well-known. Before, when I was younger, I'd go to school and I would sit in the cafeteria without food and everybody would just wonder what's wrong for the entire month. But I was too ashamed to say, we're fasting. Because this was something nobody knew about, no one understood. And so that's an important facet of our faith, is the idea of empathizing with people who don't have, like we're sharing a meal today and we're enjoying it. There are people who don't have that opportunity. So that month is a month of spiritually cleaning oneself, to feel those feelings, to give back to a community that needs that food as well. We have the 2 Eid celebrations. Until I think 2 years ago, New York State did not recognize this holiday, but recently it has been recognized in the New York State, so that's a positive step forward that a lot of people weren't aware of. Still, in this university itself, if you notice, one of the things around Christmas holidays, there's Christmas decorations. Around Halloween, there's Halloween decorations. A lot of holidays are represented, but a lot of diverse holidays are also neglected. And I think that's one of the things that Muslim students feel very strongly about here, is whenever our Eid holidays are here, and I'm sure other students of other backgrounds also feel similar. I think a point of note, even in our communities here, there's change we can make. There's ways we can make this university more inclusive, more welcoming, not so tunneled onto one background or one culture or community. So that's one of the things that I had mentioned in another one of my workshops, that UB doesn't yet fully embrace all of these aspects. Eid is not recognized. Even in America, it's not well recognized. In Canada, though we make no comparison, the Prime Minister makes, right? They've constantly put us to shame. No. But the Prime Minister makes the effort in this regard, to give out Eid messages every Eid to all the Muslims in Canada, that creates a feeling of inclusion, of welcome, of we are a part of society that is recognizing us and our holidays, because our holidays is really what brings us together in happiness and should be those moments we all treasure and are able to acknowledge together. And so these are things that America is yet working on, is places that we need to work harder. But I wanted to show that this ideal of peace, of submission, of hard work, of fasting, of required charity in Islam. You're required to give 2.5% of your wealth to charity. It's actually one of the most generous religions in the world because it's mandated that you have to give. This is my Islam. My Islam is not the one that's demonized in the media. My Islam is not the one that goes on mass shooting sprees. My Islam is not responsible for terror. And so I should not have to apologize, and I feel as though I should not have to be afraid, but yet quite often we are. One wrong should not justify more. Islamophobia in America is more relevant now than ever before. I know it's a little small, but this was an article in November 16th, reported, I believe, in the Independent, where it reported that anti-Muslim hate crimes have surged by 67% in this recent year, which is the largest increase since after September 11th. And this is, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's any race group, any background that has faced hate crimes. But in the highest jump of hate crimes has been the anti-Muslim rhetoric and the anti-Muslim actions. The Council of American Islamic Relations, which is a very big advocacy group in the United States, says that a lot of it is due to the mainstreaming of Islamophobia during Donald Trump's presidential campaign, and a lot of reports were not put into the FBI data. And I've personally attested to the fact that I've had experiences which I've never reported. And these are just a part of the kind of culture we do tend to live in, where things such as rocks being thrown into mosques, whereas a New York imam and his assistant were gunned down in broad daylight while they were trying to go offer Saturday prayers. 2 Muslim women They were pushing their babies in strollers, and they had their headscarves ripped off while the women were being punched and kicked. There was a woman who was struck in the face and body while a person shouted, "This is the United States of America. You're not supposed to be different from us." Even in recent times, I've personally, in the last few weeks, heard of 2 mosques that had fires set to them. These are not isolated cases, and if we are taking these reports, even the simple ones of how much has been reported, there is an uptick of Islamophobia. So we became from a nation that welcomes immigrants to one that makes them fear for themselves. And this is a reality. And sometimes we think, that's not happening in UB. Well, is it not? It might not be happening in the same way. However, this was an event we had 2 years ago, where it was, not 2 years ago, last year, after the Paris attacks, where people were allowed to put on the headscarf and kind of share the experience a Muslim woman might feel, and kind of spend the day in it, or spend just a moment, 2 minutes, and take a photo saying how they felt. After it was posted in the Spectrum, some of the comments came back saying, "Like clockwork, they play the victim," or "Muslims are like the younger sibling who needs a present on your birthday so they don't throw a temper tantrum." Hold on a second. So the fact that something bad happened and other people also faced retribution, and the article included an instance where one of my friends was harassed verbally for expressing Muslim, and she doesn't wear a scarf, she doesn't wear hijab, but she was expressing Muslim sentiment, and she was harassed and attacked for that. So that's what the article focused on. And yet their point was, you're not allowed to be victimized because of what happened to us. So we are allowed. Why do we have to care about you? It's like this almost a hypocritical stance that if something bad happens to our people, and this our people is a very small circle, by the way, then if something bad happens to you, it's just a retribution. You should have expected it. Why are you focusing on it? And this was at UB itself. And these were comments that were not isolated. In this year itself, we had 2 marches. The first march was the first week after the ban took place. And it was with the Black Law Student Association. We had over 300 people there. We had an anti-Trump rally. We had anti-Trump sentiments. We had other sentiments like protesting the ban, protesting the hate against immigrants. And yet, at the same time, we had a pro-Trump rally designated solely for the opposite causes. And like I said, this country is free for anyone to express their values. But don't think that this sentiment doesn't come to UB. A lot of the signs I read were saying that immigrants should be kept out and that they deserved to be left out of this country because of the awful things that they brought in. It's the worst feeling to feel that you have to distance yourself from your background solely on the basis of the fact that your background has been demonized. You are imagine, when you're saying these 7 countries are banned, you are automatically labeling every individual in these countries as having this label of terror. How can you label a nation as full of terrorists? There are mothers, there are fathers, there are children, there are people who work hard every single day of their lives. Being an immigrant, coming to a new country isn't a walk in the park, isn't a stroll. You have people who, after this ban, they had sold their livelihoods in Egypt, every single thing that they owned in order to come, and then they were told in the middle of nowhere, no, America doesn't want you anymore. And then what could they do? They were stranded. And this is the fear that is evident in various people. As you said, a lot of the countries, for example, the women coming from the UAE may not have been banned. But that overarching sense of fear that we have created, America is no longer the nation that opened its arms to the immigrants. It's a nation where one has to think, do I really want to go there? Is it worth the risk? I'll say a little bit more about this later. I wanted to show a video. And let's see, it should go. So I just want you to watch the video initially, if you would, and then I have a comment to say. This was recent, by the way. This was in the last, I would like to say, week or so is recent.
Just being kicked off the plane, not going to New York.
Here we go. Everyone else is on the plane. This lady's transporting me wherever I have to go. Surprise, surprise, my bag's already off the plane. And now I'm just waiting. Can't believe this is happening. Honestly, I feel like a criminal. They do me some water. Oh, and I'm sitting by some boxes. So myself, I haven't been to any of those countries. My family's not associated with any of those countries. So I still can't work out why.
Here's the thing. That individual, he had a valid British passport. He had never been to any of those 7 countries. And very, very recently, he was on a school trip. He was a teacher. And he was denied entry to America. So when we think, you know what, people should not be worried, the ban's been over, the courts have said it's illegal, and yet this individual, he was still, as of yesterday when I checked reports, was not given a reason as to why he was not allowed in. Here's where it gets interesting. I don't have the ring on right now, but I recently got engaged. My fiancé is friends with this individual. He has a British passport. He was born in London. He was raised there. He's working in Saudi Arabia as adjunct professor at a university. And yet, I am worried that as I spend day after day planning this wedding, come July, I don't know if he'll make it in. And that is the reality you have to wake up to and face every single day. That it could be for no reason, not by association, not by passport, not by visa, but solely for the basis of one's faith and one's affiliation to it. And so when we say this doesn't affect people, it does affect people. And it does impact how we see this nation and our role in it. I can't say I'm trying to integrate myself or be a part of it when constantly I see the opposite. And I see that the ones that I love and I hold dear are afraid to come visit me for fear that they won't be allowed. That I'm planning something amazing and yet I don't know if it'll actually even happen. So this is the state of our things, and to keep that in mind, the ban is not over. Although his first executive order was declared illegal by the American courts, he will issue another order in the coming weeks with different rules to achieve his aim. And none of us know what those may be. And statistically, here's the best part. There have been no successful terror attacks by citizens of any country on that list on the U.S. soil since 9/11 or even prior to that. The report found that over half of the 82 people who were considered terrorists under this nation or have been who were killed or captured were born in America. Why are we looking outside our borders for the problem when we are creating the problem within our own borders? You're not creating the problem by stopping people from coming in. You're creating the problem by ostracizing and alienating and justifying those acts for the people who are already inside. So before I end and we open up to questions, I have to say that it's not easy being an immigrant, a Muslim, a new person coming into a foreign land that demonizes them. It's easy to forget that we were all immigrants once. A week ago, one of the president's closest advisors, Stephen Miller, he said, strongly defending these policies, that our opponents, the media, and the world will soon see that as we begin to take further actions, that the powers of the president to protect our country are very substantial and will not be questioned. Now I have to ask, will we question? As I look around this office, I see allies, I see friends, I see supporters, people who are open and agreeing to look at our different backgrounds, hear our stories, learn our faiths, and to never give up, come what may. There are times when we don't have the option to stand down, and we don't have the option to disappear, where our voices are needed, our questions valuable, and our communities need to be united. And this is what we're doing here. And I am standing here as a Muslim, as a woman, as an immigrant, and as an American. And I would like to, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for allowing me to speak here today. Yes, please.
Samiha, thank you for a great speech. You're a very inspirational speaker. My name is Walt Hakala, and I teach in the Asian Studies program. And I think myself and Professor Faizan Haq, we're the only two professors at a university of 30,000 students who teach courses on Islam at UB. And I was just wondering if you could maybe tell, maybe from your experience in the MSA, we're not trying to reach you, but how we can maybe find ways to teach more students in this community. I'm not a religion teacher. I teach literature and the relationship between literature and Islam, and I tell my students I'm not there to make them a better person or anything. I'm just trying to expose them to the diversity that you mentioned. But what are some? Do you get a sense that there's an interest in this at a curricular level at UB in learning about a religion? Because as far as I can see, there's no place for any sort of religious studies currently at this university. It's not just Islam, but
I would have to agree with you that I don't think that our current state of affairs makes courses like this very, I don't want to say conducive, but very easy to conduct. Like I said, we had Islamic Awareness Week recently, and the MSA has been around here for decades, and yet every year we hold an Islamic Awareness Week in efforts to bring in new faces and new people. Thankfully, this year was far more successful than most. However, a disturbing and alarming trend I see recently, amongst perhaps our generation, perhaps this time, I don't know, people support things when there is a drive to support them. When there is a lot of voices saying, this is an important issue, let's support this now. And then 2 weeks later they move on to the next issue. They never, or if you don't have to raise your hand, but imagine you're scrolling through Facebook. How often have you read the title of an article and never actually clicked because you don't want to really know more, you just want to know everything that happens? And that's why articles now put everything that is the main important parts in the title of the article itself. This is what happened. Because people don't click. People don't read more than what's the superficial level. So I fear often with these movements, like I said, the first march we had over 300 individuals because it was right after the ban. It was relevant, it was big, it was hot. Everybody felt for it. It's still relevant, it's still valid, it still needs attention. This recent march we had last Friday had about 100 people. So about a third of those individuals. So it's like as soon as that hot topic passes, the interest fades and wanes and people disappear. And we are left in the same situation, or even worse, than we were before, waiting for the next uprise, for the next bad thing to happen so that people can finally look back at us again and say, you know what, oh, this has still been going on? Islamophobia isn't a new thing. It's not something that just happened because of this ban. It's been here, but it's been ignored because it's easy to ignore. And so I fear, because UB prides itself as a research institution, it places a lot of import and focus on research, on the labs, on the sciences, on those types of aspects. And yet when it comes to, like I said, the real impact of diversity, learning, and engaging with new cultures, religions, it falls a little short, and I feel that our student body is honestly disengaged. And it's something that I've been trying to work on and I've been trying to combat, but it's like an uphill battle. But I feel like the more people we get interested, the more we perhaps may be able to improve. But I know that's not an ideal answer. I wish it could be. But I am looking for solutions just as much as anyone in this regard. So, yeah. Yes.
Just kind of along with that, I'm curious what you know about what's happening at UB, but it's not the same thing, but I'm of Middle Eastern descent,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the reasons that there's such a hard time getting services, programs, or anything
Mm-hmm.
who are Middle Eastern is because they're not even counted as a separate group.
Yes. Oh.
I don't know that UB even tracks religion, but
Mhm.
for students, but I'm curious if you know of any kind of movements to just even get an idea of how many students we have who are impacted by this so that we can start to advocate. And I know that California has been successful
Mm-hmm.
in getting, I think it's Arab, in getting Arab
Mhm.
on like UCLA's admissions form so that they can just start to even keep track of how many there are.
Right. UB does not look at religious affiliations, like you said. So whenever you apply, they won't ask you for your religious affiliation. People of Middle Eastern or Arab descent are asked to classify as white, which is some of the frustration of a lot of my friends who are in those areas, because then they don't get a lot of the benefits. For example, they will never get minority benefits even if they are a minority. They will never get support for a lot of things because they are just classed under this overarching idea of being white. And some of them they don't even seem to be. For example, if you've seen Yemenis, a lot of them, you can distinctly tell them apart, and yet they're white. And so it's like, I feel like this whole idea of race needs to be reevaluated in America, honestly. It's just, it's changed from year to year. I mean, initially I believe what Mexicans were also considered white when they first were introduced, and so then they had to fight to be given that distinction. And so every time there is a group of people that's kind of lumped into something and not given the same opportunities. So I would say there is no movement that I know of currently. There are a lot of complaints. So I hope there may be some attention to that. But yeah, nothing so far at UB that I see has changed in that field.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Sorry, I don't want to, but
Sure.
do you know if anyone is tracking any violence or hate crimes against students who are Muslim at UB?
I do not believe they are. The thing, they always say, tell someone, speak out, etc., but often it's not exactly as easy as it seems. It's not like those opportunities are made open or available. Thankfully, I do have to admit, overall, UB is pretty inclusive in my opinion. I do feel like people are less aggressive, more like they will ignore the issue, then combat it, or do anything about it. They will ignore it. But it's kind of where you want to be like, I wish you cared, but at least even if you don't care, you're not, taking it out against me. So it's kind of like those situations where ignorance isn't bliss, but at least it's not harm. So it's kind of like that from my experience at UB. Overall, the people that I've experienced more negative reactions from has been an older population on and off campus. So the students themselves seem pretty different. And interestingly, I've been to a few workshops. What feedback I have had, because these workshops were mandatory, so these students came into them, not because we were advertising as a club and people were like, yes, I'm interested, I'm coming in, but because they had to go, and then they found out new things. And then these individuals said, you know what, I came from a background where there were no Muslims. I came from a background where there were, there's an all-white community. It was a suburban area. I had never experienced anything like this. So coming to UB was a culture shock for me. I learned a lot of things. I experienced a lot of things. And I was like, you know what, that's really positive. If there was a way we could bring in more of these things without having to pull teeth, it would really break down a lot of the barriers that exist. But like you said, people sign up for their own classes, so they get to pick. And it's not as easy to be like, you know what, this would really, really benefit you and you might really like it, because they'll just like, I need the easy A. So that's the struggle. But overall, UB has not been too bad, but there isn't any specific area. And here's the thing. A lot of reporters have come out to me and been like, do you know students at UB? As the president of the Muslim Student Association, do you know anybody who's been affected by the ban? Do you know someone who might be impacted? Here's the thing, and I keep saying it over and over. They won't tell you and they won't tell me. You know why those girls didn't show up on that video? It wasn't because they were just shy or just because of cultural dictates. People are afraid to put their names out there, to put their faces out there, to admit I'm from this country, because what if I've been flying under this radar and that just puts me right up here and sends me out? So as much as people want to talk to people who are directly impacted, they're not going to talk because we have not created a country that is trusting enough, that is safe enough, that is capable of protecting its people enough, as sad as that is, for them to be able to say, yes, this was something that happened to me and I want help. Or I'm afraid. Some people are honestly, they're not leaving UB, they're not leaving this community because they're afraid they won't come back in. I know one Iranian student wasn't able to come back in. I don't know if that changed recently, but initially after the ban, they weren't able to come back in. Over 200 people were potentially impacted, and there was still a lot of data collection going on to see how many of them made it, how many of them didn't. With the changing of the bans and then like a new one coming in, we don't know. It's all kind of up in the air still.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Samiha, for coming and talking with us. My name is Sarah. I'm a second-year PhD student here in the School of Social Work. And I have a question that's a little bit related to something you shared about reporting and being on and off campus. Though he's, excuse me, he came here in, well, he was 16 as an unaccompanied minor. My spouse is an immigrant from India. Been married for 10 years. We have a child. And there was an event that happened 2 years ago where he got pulled over for something silly, and the officer eventually ended up asking him for his immigration status. He's been in the United States since he was about 16. He was someone who was fortunate enough to have a green card at the time. But then when the police officer actually saw the document, he was like, oh, is this what it's supposed to look like? And you know, we didn't report it, nothing happened, in part because he was thinking about all the other things that police have done that are so much more, he was like, oh, this isn't something you report. But I'm just wondering about, and as we've seen even in the last week, someone doesn't necessarily have to actually be Muslim or be from an Arabic background to be, you know, shot for having brown skin. Could you speak to this issue of the on-campus, off-campus experience of students? And just any incidents that have been reported about people's interactions with police, and if something happens, like do you have access to like the legal aid services in Buffalo or anything like that?
So, very good question. Like you said, a lot of Muslim cultures, mine included, promote this idea of fly under the radar because you don't want to be under anyone's attention. Like you just don't. That's the first point. You know how as children you are taught that, oh, go to the police officer if you need help. It's kind of like, yes, but don't get the attention of the police officer in the first place. It's kind of like that. That's the initial base. Like, don't get in trouble. Don't do things that could be seen in the wrong way. If I go to a mall, I still am very obvious about my actions because I don't want to be taken in any suspicious light. As sad as that may seem. You get people standing behind you that you see, oh, there's 10 other people in this store. Why are you standing next to me? I said I don't need your help. It happens. It's a reality. And then you begin to act differently on that basis. You begin to be more obvious. You begin to say yourself, like, oh, you know what, there's nothing going on, blah, blah, blah. So the first basis is often Muslim students, Muslim adults, anyone often tries to not attract the attention of the authorities. If they do, it's often very cautious and I would like to say careful. But when things do happen, often the problem with Muslims and immigrants is that they don't know their rights or they don't know how they're allowed to assert them. For example, am I allowed to say I need a lawyer when there have been so many cases? For example, this He was an alumni of UB. His name is Akram Shibli. I don't know if any of you know him. Yep. So he was detained at the border between America and Canada. And his brother is part of CARE. So he's a lawyer. He knows what's going on, what's okay, what's not okay. When he was trying to come over from the U.S. to Canada, this happened multiple times. And from Canada to the U.S., it happened multiple times recently, not before, recently. He was stopped. He was searched. His phones were confiscated. He was told, give us the password to your phone because we're going to search your social media accounts. He was made, and he was held for hours and hours until he didn't know what to do. We don't know our rights. We don't know where that line is between what you're allowed to ask me and what you're not allowed to ask me. And so he unlocked his phone, and his social media accounts were searched. His phone was searched. And then he was, after hours, let back in. He's been going back and forth for ages. There's no criminal record, no identity, American citizen. And yet this is going on. In fact, there is currently, I don't know who his name was, a bill being put in to make it so that upon discretion, people's social medias can be legally checked. So anything you said, even if you were 17 and angry at the whole entire world, is now up for scrutiny and could be used to ban you from this country. And that's a bill currently in process as well. So that's the difficulty, is that you try to stay out of attention. When you face attention, you don't know your rights. There is Muslim legal aid in Buffalo, and I have someone I know who works in that department, and she does try to get advocacy out there, get information out there, but it's still shaky. CARE is always opening its door to its services, but in that moment itself, there isn't like a hotline where you can call, like, I can get help right now to know my rights right now. It's kind of like a long, drawn-out process, which makes it a little difficult, in my opinion. Yes?
Your fight to be equal in this country is no different than my fight to be equal in this country.
Yep.
My people are pulled over daily. My grandson was stopped for walking in the street, given a ticket, and had to go to court. Your fight is no different than mine. We fight the same struggle each day. I was born in this country, so was my mother. My parents were, my grandparents, and I find it hard. I want to put this in the right words. I find it difficult when you come from a different country. And with everything that's out there, and I do not mean to be disrespectful at all, with everything that's out there about terrorism, and I don't agree with Donald Trump at all.
Okay, sure.
Please don't.
No, please, feel
But,
free.
I think that there is going to be some type of scrutiny. I think there's going to be some type of scrutiny. I think that what they're doing now is wrong. I think that's wrong. But I live in this country every day, and my people are stopped by the police every single day. Every day. And we've lived here all our life. So how do you compare what you're going through with what I go through, with what my people go through, with what my community goes through every single day? And we're from this country.
What I would say to that, and you have a very valid point, and it's something I've said, if you've seen any of my interviews with the Time Warner Cable when they came in for Islamic Awareness Week, is that I'm talking out. I've never talked out as publicly or as often as I have as of late. And every time I do, I mention that our struggles are not unique, and they're not solitary. What we face is something that a lot of communities, as well as you've mentioned, face. And that should make us stronger in supporting each other and not building each other down, whether it's undocumented workers, whether it's that pipeline being built over people that whose land America stole, whether it's the African American or the Black community, whatever community it may be. It is now imperative more than ever, I feel, to stand up in solidarity with each other and not against each other. Because just as I would not want harm for my brother or my sister, I would not want harm for any other community or any other people, whoever they may be or whatever backgrounds they may be. Scrutiny may be the reality, but it is not the ideal. It's not the ideal for your community. It's not the ideal for my community. It's not the ideal for any minority community to be automatically looked at. Even, for example, Hispanics or Mexicans. Do you think they get a free card? They don't either. And I'm not saying, I'm only here representing Muslims because I am a Muslim. But that doesn't mean that this struggle is solitary, that it's alone. We have a duty, and this is why you're in social work, I feel. I love this office and I love this field because it cares. It brings people and it brings communities and looks at them as individuals that all have struggles and difficulties and trials, and looks at how can we help. It doesn't look at what I'm facing alone, but how can I help what anybody is facing together. And so as I come here, because of what I have gone through, I feel like it helps me empathize with your situation more. I feel it helps me understand the struggles of what it means to be scrutinized or, looked at differently for whatever purposes, whatever reasons. So I just hope that the takeaway we can take is not me, I, or you, but us, as America as a whole. Because I don't want to say that my parents are citizens, I'm a citizen, but I don't want to say that I am any less of an American than someone who's lived here hundreds of years, as long as we follow the same ideals, as long as we pay those taxes, as long as we are part of productive community members. I feel like this is what creates citizenship. Not because America was never America unless you're a Native American. You can't tell me that I am solely American for the basis of my heritage. It didn't exist here. So whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, we all came here at different points in this timeline. And the point is, how do we meld this timeline to be one that's a patchwork rather than a melting pot? Because a melting pot is not unique, whereas a patchwork is, and it's beautiful in that way. So.
Thanks. And just a couple of resources. One, ACLU.org. Check it out for rights. That's a 24-hour resource. It's not going to get you a lawyer, but that's an important. And then on campus, they need a report about the Office of Equity, Diversity, and affirmative action, it used to be, is the one responsible for that human rights monitoring and reporting for the university. And that's both the state and federal authority.
I think that we are out of time.
Yeah.
But thank you so much.
No, you're
And
welcome.
thanks for all the good questions. I think we all learned a lot today. So thanks.
Thank you.
We'll do